Do you consider yourself a high achiever? Smart, driven, highly successful? I am so excited to have you. My name is Julia Arndt and I'm the host of the Stress Podcast. I will help you develop your stress resilience the same way you've developed your workplace superpowers. Learn peak performance tools to thrive at work and in your personal life. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Stress Podcast. I am very excited to interview our last podcast guest of the year 2021 today. And it's Yemi Penn. Hi, Yemi. How are you today?
Hi, I'm wonderful, Julia. How are you? Thank you so much once again for having me.
Yes, it's really my pleasure to have you. Yemi, you're sitting in this beautiful space. So the first question that I have, which I always have, but I'm very curious to hear your answer, is where are you located? What time is it? And what have you been up to this morning?
Oh, gosh. Let me start the other way. It's 7 a.m., which isn't usually that early for me. 7 a.m. I am in Sydney, New South Wales in Australia. What I've been up to, just some fooling around with my partner, if you really want to know. And then I headed straight here. So nothing like contributing to the world.
That's fine. It's only 7 a.m. in the morning. So I'm very excited that you're joining us so early. Thank you so much. It looks so beautiful in your backyard. It's so green and so sunny.
It is. I've just been called to be closer to trees more than usual. And every time I move, there's trees in the background because I'm moving again in a couple of weeks. And it's just, I'm on the Central Coast and Australia is land that I don't even think people know just how blessed they are to have it. So I love that this is my backdrop in most of my meetings.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna do a quick tour so you can see what my view is at the moment.
Oh, show me.
Can you see
okay.
this?
Oh yes, I can. You got trees. That's not snow, is it?
It is.
Wow.
we had a 5-foot snowstorm in the last 2 days.
So wow. Where are you?
In Winter Wonderland, in Lake Tahoe in California, in the mountains.
Oh.
Yeah.
But okay, so I'm finding that beautiful. I don't like cold, but I'm finding it beautiful. Do you still find it beautiful?
I love it. It's like the best. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I actually lived in Sydney for 6 months in 2010.
Wow.
It's really always
was that
nice.
as a traveler? What were you? What did you come over? Was it
I did an internship at the German Australian Chamber of Industry and Commerce in downtown Sydney. And I lived in Northbridge in North Sydney and commuted with the bus into downtown every day. Yeah.
I used to live around Northbridge. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. I remember when I first got here, I just thought somebody pinched me because my workplace, I had to go past the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House, and it was just like, this can't be real. This is what you see in postcards. So I can imagine that would have been
I felt
great
the same way when I did that. Yeah, that's so cool.
Wow.
Yemi, tell us about what you've been up to over the last few years.
Oh, last few years, if I could summarize it, I have been breaking down more barriers. If I could, I like to give things a theme. And specifically just daring to live life, like stretching, if I can use some of the language you use, stretching my resilience blueprint. That's really what I've been doing. It started off by setting up my first consultancy, or setting up my consultancy. It was my first business in Australia. And then doing a lot of personal development, trying to figure out, why haven't I done this before? What was stopping me? And then becoming a completely different parent. I'm a single parent to 2 kids. And that, how I viewed motherhood changed. And then I started to work on my trauma. And then I started to open more businesses and start to see more things. And so it's been that over the past couple of years. And more recently, I've just filmed my 3rd documentary and started a PhD. So I'm really stretching every single possibility there is in life. So yeah, we could go anywhere with that, but a lot.
I know. I'm like, okay, I want to know all of the things. So let's start with the documentary. What was the documentary about?
So last year, I thought I wanted to study. but the only next study for me was going to be a PhD or MBA. And I was done with studying. Didn't want to do it. I'm done. And I went back because I thought I wanted to study about trauma. I'm really intrigued in what it looks like when we don't resolve our trauma, but also the link it has to fulfilling our highest potential. And so I thought, I want to do a PhD, but in documentary. I don't want to be writing forever. Do you think anyone would let me? And I did a few conversations, and then eventually I just thought, you know what, I think it would be easier if I just make a documentary. I never made a documentary. I'm not in that field. I'm an engineer by profession. And so I just Googled how to make a documentary. And I found a few people who just jumped onto the vision. And the title of that first documentary was, Did I Choose My Trauma? And the question is significantly empowering the not. And the journey has continued. I traveled to London and the States last month, did another one, but this one I just did last week. It's called Cleaning Our Trauma, where it's a big call to action for society. You know, I almost want to speak to David Attenborough. He speaks about the planet a lot, sustaining the planet, and I love his work. But I'm wondering when we're all going to realize that if we don't sustain humanity, there is no planet. There is no planet as we know it, Earth. So my real work is, how can we clean our trauma? Because then cleaning the planet will be significantly easier.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And where can we watch those documentaries?
So the first one, Did I Choose My Trauma, is on YouTube. You can put that in YouTube or on Facebook. The other ones won't be released till either April or mid next year, because we're currently trying to work with some of the platforms, Netflix, to get that out to have a wider reach. But the first one is definitely on YouTube and Facebook.
Okay, wonderful. And so what did you choose to do your PhD in eventually?
The same thing, but the question, my primary question now is, can our traumatic events be transformative, but specifically looking at Indigenous cultures and how they heal and resolve trauma. So I'm really interested in going back to basics, and you know, we've got Indigenous culture in Australia. I'm obviously very interested in the African Indigenous culture, but also really interested in the First Nations people in Canada. So once again, I kind of get these downloads, but those are the cultures I'm wanting to look at. Say, well, what did you do when distressing events happened? I think sometimes we look too much to the West, that we forget that there are so many original people of the land who have so much wisdom. And I'm really keen to get in there and hopefully at the end of the PhD have a few different modalities people can use.
That's so interesting. And I obviously want to get into that topic. But one last question is, where are you from? Where did you grow up originally?
Yes. So it's funny, I have this semi-tagline, which is, I am a British-born Nigerian living in Sydney, Australia. So I was born in the UK, but I did spend a big chunk of my childhood in Nigeria, which is West Africa. And there was a lot of to-ing and fro-ing, but definitely a big part of who I am is Nigerian, but then also having been born in Britain and gone to university and finished secondary school there, I have the accent of a South Londoner.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful accent. I love it so much.
Thank you.
Great. All right. So let's dive into this topic, which I am so fascinated by as well. And I think I've dealt with a lot of trauma and healing actually over the last 15 months. And the question is, do we choose our trauma? What kind of
question
answers,
is that?
I know. What kind of answers have you found over the last few years, really diving into this topic?
I love you. You ain't playing around. You've just gone straight in for the question. I love it. Do we choose? Firstly, when I did my documentary, I had it, did I choose my trauma? Because I have a big view that we hold the responsibility in our journey. Even, you know, as I go through my PhD, I want to be very careful on telling people what they did and didn't do. I think part of the healing is owning the role is. So I'm going to speak about me, and then I'm going to invite you and your listeners to ask themselves the question. And I believe most of you, if you're connected to your body, you would know. I say in the documentary that in this lifetime, and remember, I'm an engineer, so I'm quite reasonable. I can be analytical, but you might hear me speak quite spiritually every now and again. in this life, no, there's no way, especially the trauma I talk about with me, I didn't choose it. However, on some other level, on some other life, and just to make it relevant to anybody who doesn't believe in that, all you've got to do is have a parent pass away and you think about them, or grandmom or an auntie, or you feel them, or sometimes you hear a song, you can't, and you're thinking, shoot, I have not heard that song in a while, but that song is related to something. There is something outside of this plane that you and I are currently liaising that I don't think we know much about. And I feel in some other plane, in some other life, I chose not the traumatic events, but the experience I would get from it. You know, I got interviewed by Jack Canfield, who's the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And he shared what I kind of knew innately, which is he thinks before we come into this life, we're kind of sitting around a campfire. I think they're singing Kumbaya or something. And someone's saying, you know what, when I come back this time, I want to learn how to use my voice. I want to learn how to fight injustices in the world. I don't know who's playing this game, but I think that's what we're saying. And I'm not convinced. I'm still trying to find out. And that's why I want to go back to indigenous cultures. Do we have any say in exactly what happens? Or is it just the experience, the growth, the transformation from it that we learn? And the real key is to remember that when we're here, so we just don't keep on suffering. And most importantly, so we can help other people so that those kind of events don't keep happening. That was a mouthful, but I think you got it.
Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah. And, you know, again, because I think I've been going through a lot of trauma over the last 15 months, I've had to deal with this question of, do I choose my trauma, right? Do I choose this experience? And I actually believe the answer is yes.
Wow.
Because I think, you know, going through this process and growing so much over the last 15 years and being so much pushed out of my comfort zone. And I want to talk with you about choosing the uncomfortable over the comfortable as well. It's helped me grow so much into the person that I am today. And I love the person that I am now. I love the person that I was 15 months ago because I didn't really know what I was missing out on, right? But going through this trauma and going through all this pain and hurt, I really stretched myself to become, you know, an evolved me. And I know that if I wouldn't have had that experience, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And yeah, I don't know. I think there is, you know, and, you know, I think it's really interesting that you're making the differentiation between, do we choose the trauma or do we just like get into this experience, right?
Yeah.
That's like super granular, but I think eventually if we are open to it, open to that growth and open to that personal development, and we can see it from that perspective of, wow, there's this really shitty thing that happened to me, but I'm not going to make myself the victim. Instead, I'm looking at this as an opportunity to grow and become a better version of myself, then yes, I think, you know, it's so powerful. And then we will have hopefully less suffering with that, or like, I don't know, I think there is still suffering, but maybe it's a little bit cushioned and a little bit easier to manage.
And I love your exploration. I really, I mean, these kind of conversations, I can go off track, so definitely put me in line. But, you know, just you speaking in your mind, I can see your mind moving, you're exploring what it is you're going through. And as you were speaking, sometimes I get nervous because I think if I just looked at my, you know, I know we have more than one, well, most of us, the specific traumatic event that I spoke about in my TED talk as well, there's a part of me that says, okay, if I start healing or resolving, that's great. But then what if those traumatic events keep happening to somebody else? That's when I'm triggered as a human being. That's when I think, surely I want to try and help someone else. I don't want to. And this is when I start to have conflicts of, Yemi, you can't save the world. But that's what my investigation really is. Do we go through that so we can come back and help others, so we can not just transform ourselves, but make a movement to stop others? I think so, because I wouldn't be speaking to you if, you know, I didn't have the Martin Luther King Juniors of the world, if I didn't have the Rosa Parks. So it's, yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out, and no one has done any data on it. You know, it's not like because it's classified as feelings, but it's necessary because it doesn't directly connect to the economy, doesn't mean it isn't value. So yeah,
Yeah.
explore.
Yeah, well, I assume that you have probably experienced a lot of trauma in your life as well, which is the reason why you got into this field in the first place. Is that the right assumption?
It is, and the funny thing is, I don't see it as a lot. I think others will, and that's what I'm learning. So, I mean, I by all means, you can definitely watch the first documentary, but once we get the first review of this last one I've done, it'd be really insightful. The therapists, the practitioners, I make sure I get a range of people. What might be traumatic for you might not be for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, when I do my TED talk, I'm a bit cheeky. I start off by saying my trauma is bigger than yours. And I just think the rest of us, the world is either ignoring its trauma because it doesn't think its trauma is worth speaking about because they weren't in a war or, nothing like an assault happened. And so what happens is that thing that happened that really bothered them, that kind of really broke them, is festering on because they think it's a small trauma. And I'm saying, check it, because if your relationships are getting ruined or you are ruining relationships because of that small trauma, then you want to go look at it. So I wouldn't say I had a lot. The one that I'm investigating was as a child being abused, where my sexual power was taken. And that's the way I put it now, because, it wasn't an uncle, it was a family member. I don't remember him being horrible. I do remember being scared. I do remember my body being frozen. And so without doing that work, I wouldn't understand why me as an adult still freezes. Why do I still freeze when I'm in those situations? That's what I want to unlock. And so that's the particular event that I'm in. But also, it's funny because I only got sad for me when I hear another child going through it. And what's quite interesting is that I've completely separated myself from the child. And so I'm still nurturing the inner child of Yemi, because she never was at that time, as a result of that, when someone really should have said, that shouldn't have happened to you. So that's really, yes, there were other things, but my goodness, they were definitely blessings in disguise. This one, I'm not going to call it a blessing just yet, but definitely been transformative.
Yeah. But I think as an outsider, as an outside perspective, I feel like you are already helping probably so many people with your TED Talk and your documentaries, because you've been going through that. And, and then in a way, it's like, yes, maybe it is a blessing in disguise, because you are going to help so many people. And I'm sure you have already helped so many people in the past as well to go through these things and maybe see it for what it is, in order to grow and understand, ourselves better, and then obviously help others as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think it's still a bit weird. I mean, when I put out the documentary, Did I Choose My Trauma? About 98% welcomed the content, whereas 1 to 2% were triggered by the title. And that's what I'm going to have to learn as I go over time and my work reaches, more areas of the world, is that some people won't see it as that. Some people want to bury it. Some people think, stop talking about it. But the majority are like, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for the change. So yeah, I'll take that. I'll take it that it is a blessing. Thank you.
Yeah. So, once we have maybe accepted the fact or made peace with accepting trauma, how do we get through it?
So and because everybody likes steps, there were 3 things that came to me when I was writing my TED Talk. And I just thought, how can I put this in a way that people can just digest? The first one is acknowledging. And I did an interview a couple of days ago where someone said, well, what if people don't? I said, we have at least a sixth sense, whether it's your gut, your instinct, when you just don't feel something's right. Like it almost feels like you're betraying your soul. We all know. We all know. And something has either happened that we don't trust that intuition, but we know. So just acknowledging to yourself, a friend, a coach, a therapist, is the first part. The second one, which answers your question, is what I call awaken. We've got to awaken. And for me, awakening means start to look into things you never looked into before. I can't stress it. when I do my coaching or I run programs to organizations, the first thing I ask those who are listening to do is to empty their cup. Now, this is a different type of emptying cup. If you feel you know everything, you are never going to learn anything more. So if you empty your cup, especially before you come into one of my sessions, there's a real possibility you're going to learn something different, or you're going to look at something differently. And that is growth. The most flexible person controls the environment they're in. With trauma, you need that more than ever to really give you the space and the comfort to start healing. So when you awaken, things start coming up. All of a sudden, you start seeing messages either about that particular traumatic event, or a healer who can help you, or someone who did something different. For me, my biggest awakening was someone reading my numbers. When I was younger, I'd love to go to the newspaper column. Oh, I'm a Taurus, so I want to read. But they were very, very generic.
Mm.
This time round, I wasn't asking for this. Someone gifted it to me, and that changed my life. But if I wasn't awakened to it, then I wouldn't have looked into it. And mind you, I looked into it. I wasn't forced. Nobody was trying to sell something to me on the street. I just became awake. And then the last bit is the transformation, which really comes when you are ready to contribute. Some people aren't ready to contribute in the area, but the awakening will take you, I think, on a slightly challenging but fun journey, because there are so many things we don't know. And the only reason why I keep on waking up every day to keep doing this journey is because I know there is a lot of things I don't know that will take me to the end of this life and possibly another one. And so that really is the next step. Oh, just awaken. Just tell yourself, I am open. Before you go to bed at night, I am open to different methods of being, healing, and seeing. And I promise you, within 24, 48 hours, you will start seeing, hearing things that you never heard before.
Mhm. Yeah. And so how do you get comfortable with the uncomfortable? Because I feel like, we talk a lot about the concept of getting out of your comfort zone and, really growing. But I think sometimes it requires traumatic events to get to that place, right? When the suffering is
Yes.
bigger than our comfort zone, then we're like, okay, well, I guess now I don't have a choice anymore. But how are we more proactive about choosing the discomfort?
Oh, what did I do? I did a workshop a couple of days ago, and I did some research, and it said setting a goal is a planned conflict.
Mhm.
So it's basically acknowledging, when you say, how do you go seeking out to get uncomfortable? You have to plan the conflict. Give just a very mild example. I like learning different things. I've found that I'm an experiential learner, meaning that I have to experience something to learn it. But remember, we live in a society that says, don't take risks.
Mhm.
Don't take risks, because if it fails, it's going to be really bad. And that's why a lot of people focus on the 9-to-5 job. Once again, no problem with that. But I think there are other alternatives. This is where the awakening happens. There are other alternatives, and we should be free to choose that. But can we live with the risk? So I decided last year to take over a cafe restaurant, which now I say it to you is mad because I can't cook. Well, I don't cook anymore. And I've never been in that logistics side of the business, but I love the idea of having this room where people could gather. We could do the equivalent of TED Talks. I didn't think about any of this stuff. That was a planned conflict.
Mhm.
I asked people, have you opened up a cafe before? They said yes, I would never do it again. Or like they gave me stuff, but I thought, well, how will I learn? There's a reason why I want this. How will I learn? That was planned conflict. So if people are looking for discomfort, that's just an example. And ideally, you want it to be discomfort that will make you grow. Some people, I've got a 14-year-old who we both teach each other a lot, and she's definitely my biggest life lesson. As a teenager now, I think she plans conflict every damn day. But I think that's just the teenage years. You've got to figure out whether it's bringing any value to you or anybody else. So you've got to be really careful on what it is. And planned conflict or being uncomfortable doesn't mean it's always going to be hunky-dory. But if you want to grow, you do. I don't know if you've heard of the guy who tells the story of the lobster and the hard shell. apparently lobster's got really soft skin inside, as we know. But what happens is when it's about to grow, it breaks the shell, and then it grows, and then a new shell comes over it. And I found that so comforting. I just felt like that's what we are. We push our, what I call resilience blueprint, and then we have a new outer. That's when you start to awaken and say, well, I thought I couldn't do this. I did it. It was hard as hell, but I can do this next one. And then you grow again. But that breaking of the shell is the discomfort, but a new one grows. So do it.
Yeah, I love that for sure. Yeah. Growing a bigger shell, so you almost have a bigger container of things being able to happen to you. Yeah.
Yes.
There's something that you talk about, and I'm curious to just hear you talk more about it, which is, did you get the memo? What does it stand for? What kind of memo?
No, I every time I get this question, I love it, because depending on the person asking, my brain says this is how you answer it today. The truth of the matter is, when I relocated to Australia 8 years ago, just under 8 years ago, I was running away. I had a 7-year-old daughter and a 7-month-old son. I didn't know it then, but I wasn't with my then husband. I think I was thinking about divorce. And for me, it was the worst failure of all. I had 2 kids with 2 different dads. Those women were given names back in the day. That was never meant to be me. And being especially Nigerian, West African, I had told myself that was the biggest shame there was. And then I got to Australia, which I will forever be thankful for this land. And I just had time to just hear my own voice. I had time to ask questions. And then the more I had more time to think, I thought, why is no one talking about this? Did everybody else get a memo that I didn't get? Like, literally. And I honestly believe, I mean, I don't know where I get my stats from, but I think more than 50% of humanity is thinking that. They're either thinking everybody else has been given the memo on how to live this good, amazing life, and I didn't, or they are lying. There is no memo, but we're just pretending there is. And so we're all trying to live to this really fake, unrealistic life. Like, just because I watch TV shows and I see these nice together families doesn't mean that I get that automatically. And so, yeah, the title of the book came up of did you get the memo? Because I didn't. And, there should be a sequel saying how to write your own memo. Shoot, I think I'm just giving myself another job. Yeah, I think that would be the next book, how to write your own memo.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what that's about.
Okay, amazing. Yeah. I just had a conversation this morning with a friend on social media, and we were talking about work, right? Because I'm focused on people burning out in their jobs. And we just had a big power outage in Tahoe because of the big snowstorm. And so she said she wasn't able to work yesterday because they didn't have power. And she's like, and she's 8 months pregnant or so as well. And so she was like, she's like, at first I was like kind of scrambling and starting to be super nervous about not being able to work. And then I just kind of gave in and took a day off and just told myself, I'm just going to enjoy myself. And I said, good for you. That's great that you did this, especially with, the fact that you're being pregnant and you're expecting really soon. And she's like, yeah, she's like, I always have a little bit of guilt around this because, I should be working, I should be doing this. And I said to her, I'm like, I feel guilt all the time as well. I'm like, I don't talk about it. I think, you portray these like lives to the external world, because she said to me, she's like, yeah, I feel like you found this amazing balance between work and enjoying your life. And I said, I appreciate you saying this. And it's so nice that this is kind of the portrait that I'm giving as I'm sharing on social media and stuff. I'm like, but it doesn't mean that I don't not have these guilty feelings, right? And because I think as peak performers, you just, it's almost ingrained in us that, and I think we just feel really good about being disciplined. And she was talking about like letting go of control and letting go of the structure for a day and just going with the flow. And that's one thing that she's really learned in our kind of circle of friends. And I said to her, just because people are portraying that that's what they do, I'm like, it's still hard for us, even to make these choices every single day, that
Mm.
we are going outside and we are enjoying that other side of life, and and not just sit. And I think that really resonates with me in terms of that memo. Like, did you get the memo? Because
Mm.
yeah, we are all like hardworking people, and we are portraying to be always structured and disciplined, but it's like we have these, we are all struggling still, like just not a lot of people talk about it. And that was kind of her
Exactly.
her takeaway. She was like, she's like, I'm really glad that you're saying this, because you always feel like you're the only person that feels guilty or that has these kind of thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's not that way, right? We are all going through these struggles on a day-to-day basis, most of us, I would say, anyway.
No, absolutely, Julian. And I'm really glad you shared that. And I think that's why, especially with the work I do, I mean, it's really underpinned with using your voice. Because if we don't share, I mean, can you imagine what 7-8 billion of us, and yet we still feel in 2021 that we are the only ones going through what we're going through.
Yeah.
But you don't know, unless someone's bold enough to speak. So when you see a post, and I saw a post yesterday where someone said, I'm retired, meaning I'm tired today and I'm tired again. So we just keep on retiring. And I never thought of it that way. I never thought of, shoot, is that what they mean by retire? That we are just literally tired and then we just keep on going over and over. But until someone puts that kind of stuff out, you don't actually realize that you're not the only one. And I honestly think outside of worthiness, a lot of humanity is scared of being alone. And our gift, especially around our trauma, is, can we talk about it? Can we talk about it in an empowering, non-victimizing way? And like you shared, social media might be showing things going great, which they probably are, but it's not showing the other part.
100%. And it's hard I've been trying to be a lot more authentic in sharing, but it's so hard because it feels so vulnerable. And you always, I think there is this expectation of, you are a coach and like you have everything figured out, but you don't. And I think we are both coaches and consultants because we have had a lot of experiences, and we keep on having these experiences that are traumatic to us. But we learn from them, we grow through them, and then we can share that. And we have, I feel like, even more compassion and empathy for people to work with afterwards.
Absolutely.
And I also, what really resonated with me, what you were saying about, I don't know if my event was really traumatic or was more traumatic than other people, because it always depends on how you define it, right? And and for me, my traumatic event was breaking up with my fiance, and kind of going through a new life that I didn't expect to have, because I thought I had figured out my life, and I thought, I'm going to get married and I'm going to have children, and then all of a sudden that wasn't there anymore. And for someone, they might, that might not be a traumatic event, and they might just be like, oh, okay, like a few months later, I'll move on from this. But I feel like for me, it was a really big awakening, as you were saying, and a big transformation of, what did I do wrong, or how can I grow, and who am I, right? I think when you are in a relationship, you always adapt to the person, and you want to please the person, and you might not do all the things that you actually really want to do. But then as you break out of a relationship, you're like, oh, like, this is who I was, but now that I'm on my own, I'm this different person. And so I love that traumatic events, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, if it is traumatic for you, there's a reason why it's traumatic, because there's obviously something that you need to learn from it.
Yeah. Oh, so beautifully said. I've got to honor you. I want to say I see you for just sharing that. I don't know how open you have been about that, but I really do see you as you shared that. I it's weird. I felt it. I really felt it. And for me, it's an identity shake. And what I mean, I know this isn't about, I don't want to focus on you, but I just wanted to let you know that I see you. And I personally think, having not experienced something like that, but I think it's identity. It's how I felt when I asked for a divorce, or when I became a single parent the first time. I was asking questions then that I would ask differently now, which is, am I am I enough? Do I need to change? Because what I did with both my kids' fathers is, one I loved with my heart, but we had completely different views of gender role. You know, I was an engineer. I was ready to go back to work. He didn't think I should. And so I was like, And then when that relationship failed, I started to figure out, well, what's wrong with me? Well, maybe I just need to conform to the standards of the world and become a stay-at-home mum. And so what did I do? I went the opposite extreme and married a guy in the military and became a military wife dependent. You know, so and once again, these are all life lessons, but knowing what I know now, and the reason why I use my voice, even though my mum thinks, oh, stop talking about it, it's shame. No, the shame is when I sit quiet and watch other people go through a self-obliteration of what's wrong with them when there isn't. It's what do I want and who do I need to attract as a result of that? And that's what I do now, but I've done it after, you know, supposedly failing in life. So I just want to honor you, because it is a big deal, and it's an identity crisis, considering we signed up to this world of who we think we're meant to be.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you. I appreciate that. And I mean, I'm starting to be more open about it, because I feel like I've done enough healing over the last few months to actually now be able to share without breaking down in tears. And yeah, I don't know. I think, you know, I see you as being this like really strong and independent person as well. And I think, especially as strong independent women that invest their time in self-development, growth, we you know, I think we do know a lot of things. Like, I've always viewed myself as an independent person, and it's for me, it's been such an interesting journey of being in a relationship and you know, observing myself now a little bit, obviously in hindsight, of who do I become when I am in a relationship, who am I when I'm by myself. And I think the challenge really always is to stay true to yourself when you are in a relationship. So now, as I am starting to date again and, you know, meeting new people, I'm like, you know, I see myself get triggered again or fall into old patterns where I'm like, I am so good being on my own, but then in the relationship, I become this like, you know, maybe more submissive person. And it's so interesting to go through this growth and to be more aware and observant of these things. And, you know, I'm sharing these things because I don't believe it's just with a partner. I think relationships are there to teach us a lot of lessons about ourselves, right? But I think it's the same thing when we are identifying ourselves with a company, for example, right? I worked for Google for 7.5 years. And I still, after 3 years of being my own, you know, being an entrepreneur, I am still strongly identifying with the Google culture and identifying myself as a Googler. And breaking through that identity and like leaving the company was such a big step of identity crisis. And, you know, and I think, you know, and I've had these conversations with other people about maybe, for example, being an athlete, and then, you know, your career's over, and then you're falling into this identity crisis, and then redefining and connecting to yourself again in order to, you know, shape your new self. And so it doesn't matter if it is a relationship that does that, or a career change, or just maybe a person that you're meeting, doesn't have to be your partner, right? That just triggers these things in you. I think if we are more open to actually seeing those experiences as opportunities to grow and to get uncomfortable, to become a better version of ourselves, is a really, really powerful way to look at it. Which brings me to the last question that I have for you today, which is, can you engineer powerful people?
I think I've already changed from when I came up with that tagline with my strategist. I believe I can. The reason why there is hesitancy in saying, yes, I engineer powerful people, is because I still operate from the quiet, meek Yemi who still has those questions. And that's part of my superpower. And I know you use that word in some of your texts. My superpower is meeting people wherever they are, and that's why I'm quite open being vulnerable. I'm quite open being the expert, but I'm also open being vulnerable. I think Brene Brown did some work that suggests that that doesn't cancel out your expertise. If anything, it makes people draw into you more. But I know I can engineer powerful people. I do it through my coaching, through my posts, through my interviews. Because there's, as an engineer by profession, we built ourselves a belief system. And as an engineer, we also have to demolish some things. And I think I'm probably more on okay, let's go back and take away the blocks that aren't serving anymore. And what can we rebuild it with? And how can we make it agile? And how can it make you powerful in the most authentic way possible? And I'm living testament. I was not going to say that unless I knew that I could build, remodel, deconstruct, and build again. But yes, I engineer powerful people.
And can you engineer yourself as a powerful person? And how can you do it?
Absolutely, you can, and everybody should. Everybody should. We have to be our number one champion. I keep telling my daughter this, and I know she's going through the teenage years. I'm doing it with my 8-year-old son, giving them the confidence, not the arrogance, but the confidence to say, you've got to be your number one. When you go and you play a basketball or a netball game, yes, I might be there sometimes to cheer you on. Sometimes I might not be there because I'm in a meeting or there's other stuff going on. I want you to be proud of you first, because if you wait for somebody else to tell you how good you are, you're going to be really upset when nobody's there or available because they're looking after themselves. So you first engineer yourself by making sure you tell yourself you are your number one coach. If your language is not right for yourself, then you need to get into affirmations. Go onto YouTube, type in EFT, EFT. Why has that completely left my mind? It's basically the tapping phenomenon, which is a non-invasive form of acupuncture, where you have certain points. Go onto YouTube, put EFT in, about just affirmations, and get comfortable with saying things that you are grateful for yourself. That's the first thing. Second thing, the next time, which will probably be within the next 60 seconds, you find your brain saying, I can't do that, or you find conflict with a thought or an action, it's typically because you have a belief system that is now in conflict. To engineer that powerful person, I would say deconstruct it, really stop. This is where you get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Really stop and say, why am I bothered with that? So if my daughter doesn't respond to my message, or my partner doesn't respond to my message, okay, why is that bothering me? Oh, because it's been 2 hours and I've responded to his messages on time. So I have a belief system that says he must respond the same way I do. That's what I've got to analyze. But in order to do that, you have to stop, sit with the discomfort, not just act out in rage, just sit with it and figure out what belief system, does that belief system still work? If it does, I might still keep on feeling that pain. If it doesn't, what's the new one I need to create? And that's how, and you do it every single day.
Yes. Thank you so much for explaining that. I think that's so powerful and so hard. But if you can break through it, it's really, it completely changes your way of how to look at things, and it makes your life and the suffering easier.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have a book that really changed your life that you read and where you were like, wow, this, like, just the ideas in this book were really life-changing for me? Or maybe even something that you read over and over again because you just find something that resonates with you every time?
The first book that jumped out of me at me, which I can't remember much, but one thing, but I definitely know, I don't know, the best I can think is like it shifted me. Like I felt my body just say, okay, well, if you think of a computer game when you've gotten to level 5, I read it and I feel like it said, Yemi's on level 6. It was Seat of the Soul. And I think it's Gary Zukov, I might be wrong, but Seat of the Soul. That changed my life because it was an awakening. It was an awakening on how, a different perspective on how I can see life. It was, even though I'd heard it before, it made me realize that those thoughts I have, is actually my sixth sense. And I've started to exercise it like a muscle. So you've possibly said something in this interview that is a sign. And so when I leave this interview, I just make a note of it. Then that's a sign, because Julia said this, but X, Y, and Z said this 2 days ago, or I saw this there. It's something I need to look into. And that, from that book, I've started to hone in, and I've done some crazy stuff in the past 12 months that if I hadn't read that book a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have known was possible. Yeah.
Very cool. Great. Well, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you today, Yemi. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
If people are interested to learn more about you, besides going on YouTube and searching for Do I Choose My Trauma, how else can they find out about you or can contact you?
I'm an Instagram girl. So if you just go on to Yemi Penn, so yemi.penn, YEMI.PENN, and you can similarly find me on Facebook. Those are the places I am. But sometimes I'm on LinkedIn. I change my content, but if you want the real authentic Yemi, it's Instagram. Otherwise, you can go onto my website and find what I'm up to.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see what you're up to. So again, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and getting up super early to talk to me. I really appreciate it. I wish you a wonderful rest of the year. Happy holidays. And I hope to be in touch with you next year and maybe interview you again about the next upcoming documentary or any other project that you're working on.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Julia.